The priest fell for the 18-year-old parishioner until this happened. I never thought the quiet moments after Sunday Mass could hold such dangerous temptation. He was my priest, a man bound by vows, tradition, and an image of moral perfection. I was just 18, still figuring out who I was, and yet every time our eyes met, something passed between us, something neither of us dared to name. At first, it was small things, a lingering handshake, a smile that lasted a second too long, conversations that felt more personal than they should. But the closer we got, the harder it became to ignore the truth. We were both crossing a line we could never uncross. And then something happened, something that would test not only our feelings, but our faith, our loyalty, and the cost of wanting what we're told we can't have. Stay with me until the end, because this isn't just a story about forbidden love. It's about the moment when desire collides with duty, and the choices that can change two lives forever. If you've ever felt something you weren't supposed to, you'll understand why I couldn't walk away, and why what happened next will leave you breathless. It started on a late Sunday morning, the kind when the light pouring through the stained glass windows felt like it could reach into your soul. I sat halfway down the pews, pretending to listen to readings, but my mind wandered the way it had been doing for weeks. My eyes kept drifting toward the altar, where Father Michael stood, delivering a homily with a calm, deep voice that made even the most ordinary words feel sacred. He was in his late 30s, maybe early 40s, with dark hair just starting to show threads of silver near his temples. His presence was steady, collected, like nothing could rattle him. But when he looked up from his notes and his gaze swept over the congregation, something in me tightened, because sometimes it lingered, just long enough for me to wonder if I was imagining it. I was 18, still figuring out where I fit in the world, and the truth was, church had never been a place I came to for spiritual salvation. It was tradition. My family insisted on it. Yet lately, I found myself looking forward to it in a way I couldn't explain. When the Mass ended, people shuffled out slowly. The air was filled with polite chatter and the faint scent of incense. I stayed behind, pretending to flip through the hymnal. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Father Michael speaking to an elderly woman, smiling warmly, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. And then, as if he knew I was watching, he looked straight at me. It wasn't a casual glance. It wasn't the kind of look a priest should give someone my age. It was brief, but in that second, it felt like the church fell silent. My heart raced, and I had to look away. I thought that would be the end of it, a strange moment I'd overanalyze later and then forget. But as I stepped outside into the cool spring air, I heard his voice behind me. "Ethan." I froze. He had never called me by my first name before. I turned slowly. "Yes, Father?" He walked toward me, hands clasped in front of him. "I noticed you've been coming more regularly lately," he said, his tone light, almost casual. "It's good to see young people involved." I shrugged, trying to sound nonchalant. "My mom insists." He smiled, but there was something else in his eyes, something that made it hard for me to hold his gaze. "Still," he said, "you listen? Most don't." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. We stood there for a beat too long, and then he said, "Are you free for a moment? I could use some help carrying boxes to the storage room." It was such a small request, but my pulse jumped. "Sure," I said. The storage room was behind the parish hall, down a quiet hallway no one seemed to use. The smell of old books and dust hung in the air. He handed me a cardboard box filled with hymnals, and as I set it down on a shelf, I could feel him standing close behind me. "Thank you," he said, his voice lower now, softer. When I turned, he was closer than I expected. His eyes locked on mine, and for the first time, I realized just how much taller he was than me. I told myself it was just the closeness of the small room making my chest tighten, but I knew better. "It's nothing," I replied quickly, stepping back. His gaze flicked over my face, lingering just a fraction of a second too long. "You remind me of someone I knew a long time ago," he said. I wanted to ask who, but before I could, the sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway. He stepped back immediately, clearing his throat. "Well, I should let you go," he said in a louder, more formal tone. "Thank you again, Ethan." The rest of the day, I couldn't shake it. That look, that change in his voice. It felt like I had been given a secret, even if I didn't know what it was yet. The next Sunday, it happened again. This time, after the service, he asked if I could stay to help set up chairs for a community dinner. I told myself it was nothing. He probably asked others the same thing, but as the hours passed, I realized he stayed near me most of the time. We moved chairs, arranged tables, and exchanged quiet jokes that felt different. When the hall emptied, I caught him watching me as I stacked chairs. I looked back, and instead of looking away, he held my gaze. There was a moment, one heartbeat too long, before he finally spoke. "You seem older than your age," he said. I gave a half smile. "Is that a compliment?" "It's an observation," he replied, though the corner of his mouth curved just slightly. And then came the moment that would change everything. As I reached for another chair, my hand brushed his. Just a quick, accidental touch, but enough to feel the warmth of his skin. Neither of us moved right away. My breath caught, and I could see the muscles in his jaw tighten. Someone entered the hall at that exact moment, and he stepped back sharply. "You should head home," he said, his voice returning to that careful, measured tone he used with everyone else. I walked out into the fading afternoon light, my mind spinning. I told myself I was reading too much into it. He was a priest. I was barely an adult. Whatever I thought I saw, it couldn't be real. But then later that week, I found a folded note slipped into the back page of my prayer book. No name, no signature, just one line. "I think we both know this isn't just friendship." I read it over and over, my hands trembling. I didn't know if I was supposed to feel excited or terrified, maybe both. But I knew one thing, this wasn't going to fade away. And deep down, I didn't want it to. I couldn't stop thinking about that note. I kept it hidden in the bottom drawer of my desk, tucked inside an old envelope, as if hiding it from my own eyes would somehow make it less dangerous. Every time I opened that drawer for something else, the temptation unfolded. To read those words again was almost unbearable. "I think we both know this isn't just friendship." It was simple, but there was no mistaking the meaning. And it wasn't just that the words confirmed what I'd been feeling. It was that they came from him, Father Michael, a man who, by every rule he'd sworn to follow, should never have written them. By Thursday, I was certain I'd imagined it all. Maybe someone was playing a joke on me. Maybe I'd misread the handwriting. But then that evening, as I walked past the church on my way home, I saw the light on in his office. Something in me pulled me toward the door before I could think twice. I stepped inside quietly. The office smelled faintly of old wood and candle wax. He looked up from his desk, surprised to see me. "Ethan," he said, setting his pen down, "what brings you here?" I hesitated, my fingers tightening around the strap of my backpack. I was passing by. Thought I'd say hi. A slow smile spread across his face, but his eyes were sharper than usual, as if he could see right through me. "Well, I'm glad you did. Sit." I sat across from him, my heart pounding. The desk between us felt like a fragile barrier, one that could be crossed with just one step. "You've been helping out a lot lately," he said, leaning back in his chair. "I appreciate it. Not everyone your age would spend their free time in a church." I smirked. Not everyone has a reason to. His eyes flickered, and I knew I'd struck something. "And what's your reason, Ethan?" The air in the room thickened. I wanted to tell him the truth, but my throat felt tight. I looked down at the grain of the wooden desk, tracing a line with my fingertip. "Maybe I just like the company," I said finally. His voice softened, almost too much. "So do I." The silence that followed was dangerous. I could feel the pull between us, a silent acknowledgement of the boundary we were both skirting. And then he cleared his throat, breaking the moment. "There's a parish community dinner Saturday night," he said, his tone more formal now. "You should come." I frowned. I thought those were for families and older folks. He shrugged. "Consider an invitation." Something in the way he said it told me it wasn't about the dinner at all. I agreed before I could think better of it. "Okay." Saturday evening came too quickly. I stood in front of my closet longer than I should have, debating over what to wear. It wasn't a date. It couldn't be. But I still wanted to look good. I settled on a fitted navy shirt and dark jeans, something casual but not careless. The parish hall was already buzzing with voices when I arrived. Long tables were set up, covered in white cloths and lined with dishes people had brought. The air smelled of roasted chicken, fresh bread, and coffee. I scanned the room until I saw him. Father Michael was talking to a group near the front. But when he noticed me, his expression changed in a way that no one else would have caught. His eyes held mine for a fraction of a second too long before he excused himself from the group and walked over. "You came," he said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "You invited me." I replied, try to sound casual even though my pulse was hammering. He glanced around the crowded room, then leaned slightly closer. "Let's sit somewhere quieter." We ended up at a table in the far corner, away from most of the chatter. People passed by, offering polite nods, but no one lingered. "Have you thought about what I wrote?" he asked suddenly, his voice low enough that I had to lean in to hear him. The question sent a shiver down my spine. "So it was you?" I said, my voice barely above a whisper. He didn't answer directly. Instead, he gave me a look that said everything. Before I could respond, a group of parish volunteers interrupted, asking him to help move some equipment. He excused himself, promising he'd be back. While he was gone, I tried to steady my breathing. The truth was, I didn't know how far I was willing to go, or how far he was willing to take this. When he returned, the crowd had thinned. The dinner was winding down, and people were leaving in small groups. He stopped beside my chair and said quietly, "Come with me." We walked out into the cool night air. The parking lot was almost empty, the church illuminated by soft yellow lights. Instead of heading toward the main road, he led me around the side of the building to a small garden hidden from view. It was silent except for the faint hum of crickets. He stood a few feet away from me, hands in his pockets, looking at the ground. "You know this is wrong," he said finally, his voice heavy. I swallowed hard. "Then why?" He looked up, his eyes locking on mine. "Because sometimes wrong is the only thing that feels honest." I didn't know what to say. I took a step toward him, my heart in my throat. He didn't move back. There was a tension in the air, like we were standing on the edge of something neither of us could undo. And then, just as I opened my mouth to speak, the sound of a car door slamming broke the moment. We both turned. A man in a dark coat was crossing the parking lot, heading straight for us. I recognized him, one of the senior parish council members. His eyes narrowed as they landed on the two of us. "Father," he said, his tone clipped, "I didn't expect to see you here this late." Father Michael straightened, his voice suddenly formal. "Just finishing up the evening." The man's gaze flicked to me, then back to him. "I see." The weight of his stare lingered long after he walked away. When we were alone again, Father Michael exhaled slowly. "We need to be careful," he said, his voice almost a whisper. Careful. The word sat between us, heavy and unresolved. I wanted to ask what careful meant to him. Did it mean ending this before it began? Or did it mean continuing, but in the shadows? I didn't get the chance to ask, because at that exact moment he stepped closer, close enough that I could feel the warmth radiating off him, close enough that I caught the faint scent of cedar on his jacket. And then, in a voice so low I almost didn't hear it, he said, "Meet me here tomorrow night." I nodded before my brain could catch up with my heart. The walk home felt unreal, like I'd stepped out of my own life into someone else's. The streetlights blurred as I replayed his words over and over. Tomorrow night. I didn't know what would happen. I didn't know what he wanted from me, but I knew I would be there. And as much as I wanted to believe it was curiosity pulling me toward him, deep down, I knew it was something far more dangerous. The next day was a slow torture. Every hour seemed longer than the last. Every small distraction a thin veil over the fact that my mind was locked on one thing. Tonight, I told myself I wasn't going to read into it. Meeting in the garden could mean anything, a conversation, an explanation, even an ending. But the truth was, my heart didn't believe in neutral possibilities anymore. By evening, the city was washed in the amber glow of streetlights. I left home earlier than I needed to, my nerves pushing me to keep moving. The church was quiet when I arrived. The main hall dark, except for a faint light coming from a side corridor. I didn't go inside. Instead, I circled around to the back garden, the way we had the night before. He was already there, standing under the shadow of an old oak tree. The garden lights were dim, casting more shadow than illumination, and for a moment, he looked almost like a figure I'd dreamed into existence. "You came," he said, his voice low but steady. "I said I would," I replied. He studied me for a long moment, as if trying to read something beyond my words. "I didn't sleep last night," he admitted. The confession caught me off guard. "Why?" He gave a half-smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Because I keep telling myself to stop this, and I can't seem to listen." We stood in silence, the space between us charged. My pulse pounded in my ears. I took a slow step toward him, my feet crunching lightly on the gravel. "Then don't stop," I said, the words leaving me before I could think. His eyes searched mine, and for a moment I thought he was going to close the gap entirely. But instead, he took a step back, raking a hand through his hair. "Ethan, you don't understand the weight of this. If anyone finds out..." I cut in. "I know." "No, you don't," he said, his tone sharp, but not angry. It was fear. "I built my life on rules, on expectations. I've told people to resist temptation, to stay strong, to trust in something higher. And now," he trailed off, shaking his head. His voice had the kind of fracture that made me want to step closer, to reassure him. "I'm not here to ruin your life," I said. He looked at me then, really looked at me, like he was trying to memorize something. "You could," he said quietly. The air seemed to thicken between us. My chest felt tight. And then, as if surrendering to something inevitable, he closed the distance. His hand brushed my arm, just enough to make me feel the warmth of his skin, and lingered there. I didn't move. "You make it too easy to forget who I'm supposed to be," he said, barely above a whisper. Something about the way he said it made my breath catch. His hand stayed there, and for a heartbeat, it felt like the entire world had gone silent. But then, from somewhere beyond the garden wall, the sound of a door creaking open snapped us back. He stepped away instantly, his expression guarded. "Walk with me," he said. We left the garden and took the narrow path that led toward the back of the church property. It was quiet, the air cool against my skin. "Where are we going?" I asked. "Somewhere we can talk," he replied. We ended up in a small, unused chapel that sat behind the main building. The door groaned as he pushed it open, and the scent of dust and old wood filled the air. Inside, the space was dim, lit only by the faint moonlight streaming through a high window. "This place hasn't been used in years," he said, closing the door behind us. "No one will come here." The words hung between us like an unspoken invitation. I sat in one of the wooden pews, my fingers tracing the worn edges. He stayed standing for a moment, watching me, before sitting beside me. The closeness felt deliberate. "You know," he began slowly, "there's a part of me that wishes I'd never noticed you, that you'd just been another face in the congregation." I turned to look at him. "And the other part?" His eyes met mine, and the answer was in the way they softened. "The other part can't stop." The tension between us felt like a thread, pulled taut, fragile, but unbreakable. He reached up and ran his thumb along the edge of the pew, almost as if to keep his hands busy. "Do you want me to stop coming here?" I asked. He let out a slow breath. "No." That single word landed heavier than anything else he could have said. We talked for a while after that, not about the church, not about rules, but about small things. Music, books, places we'd been. And yet, every exchange was wrapped in the knowledge that there was more here, something neither of us was saying outright. At one point, he leaned back, his shoulder brushing mine. The touch was casual enough to pass as nothing, but it sent a jolt through me. I turned slightly toward him, and he didn't move away. "You should go home soon," he said finally, though there was no conviction in his voice. "I don't want to," I admitted. He smiled faintly, but there was a sadness in it. "You don't make this easy." I didn't answer. I didn't have to. The silence between us said enough. When I finally stood to leave, he walked me to the door. Before I stepped outside, he reached out and gently took hold of my wrist. The contact was light, almost hesitant, but it stopped me cold. "Be careful," he said. "With what?" I asked, with how close we're getting. I didn't break his gaze. "I'm already there." His fingers loosened, but he didn't let go right away. The look on his face was unreadable, part warning, part confession. "Good night, Ethan," he said softly. I stepped out into the cool night air, my heart pounding. That night, lying in bed, I replayed every detail. The way his voice lowered when it was just the two of us. The way his hand lingered on my arm. The way he looked at me in that dusty chapel, like he was on the edge of something he both feared and wanted. But as much as the memory thrilled me, there was another layer to it. The realization that the closer we got, the more dangerous it became. Not just for him, but for me too. And yet, even knowing that, I couldn't stop wanting more. The following week felt different. Every time I entered the church, I was hyper-aware of where he was. If I heard his voice from across the hall, my chest tightened. If I saw him speaking to someone else, I wondered what they saw. If anyone noticed the way he sometimes looked at me like I was the only person in the room. By Wednesday, I couldn't take it anymore. I lingered after evening mass, pretending to read the bulletin board in the foyer until the crowd thinned. He emerged from the sacristy, his eyes catching mine instantly. "You're still here," he said, walking toward me. I nodded. "Could we talk?" He hesitated, glancing toward the entrance where a few parishioners were still leaving. "Not here," he said. "Meet me in the parish office in 10 minutes. I spent those minutes pacing in the hallway, my palms sweating. When I finally knocked on his office door, he was alone, the blinds drawn. "What's going on?" I asked, stepping inside. He closed the door softly. "I don't have long. There's a council meeting in half an hour, but I need to tell you something." The seriousness in his voice made my stomach drop. "Last night," he began, "I got a call from one of the senior council members, the same one who saw us in the garden that night. He asked me questions about you." My breath caught. "What kind of questions?" "If you were volunteering here regularly, if you've been spending time with me outside of services, if we've been meeting alone." I felt the heat rush to my face. "What did you say?" "That you were helping with parish work. Nothing more." He looked straight at me, but I could tell he didn't believe me. I sat down slowly, my heart pounding. "So what now?" He leaned forward on his desk, his hands clasped tightly. "It means we have to be careful. More careful than before. If he pushes this, if there's even a rumor, it could ruin everything. For me, for you." I wanted to say I didn't care, that I'd deal with the consequences. But the fear in his eyes stopped me. We didn't see each other for the next 2 days. Not properly. At Friday evening mass, he avoided lingering near me. His homily was shorter than usual, his gaze never settling on me for long. It felt deliberate, and it left me restless. That night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. "Meet me at the chapel tomorrow night, 9 p.m. No name, no signature. But I need one. Saturday night was windy, the kind of wind that carried the smell of rain. I kept my hood up as I approached the chapel behind the church, glancing around to make sure no one was nearby. He was inside, standing near the altar, the soft glow of a single lamp casting shadows across the empty pews. "I didn't think you'd come," he said when I closed the door behind me. "You asked me to," I replied. He stepped closer, his voice low. "We need to talk about what we're doing." I swallowed hard. "Isn't that what we've been doing?" "Not like this." He ran a hand over his face, looking almost tired. "Ethan, the council is planning an evaluation of my work here. It's routine, but after the questions he asked me, I'm worried he's looking for something specific." The implication hung heavy in the air. "So you're saying we should stop?" I said, my voice flatter than I meant to be. He didn't answer immediately. "I'm saying we have to decide. Because right now, we're standing in the middle of something that could hurt both of us." I took a step toward him. "I'm not afraid of them." "You should be," he said firmly. "If they think I've crossed a line, they won't just remove me from the parish. They'll make sure my name is dragged through every conversation in this town. And you'll be the boy who—" He cut himself off, shaking his head. "The boy who what?" I pressed, "The boy who made the priest fall." The words landed like a stone in my chest. The wind rattled the old window panes, and for a moment neither of us spoke. Then, without warning, the lights flickered and went out, plunging the chapel into darkness, except for the faint glow of the moon through the high window. "Great," he muttered. "The storm's worse than I thought." I could barely see him as I moved closer, guided only by the sound of his breathing. "Do you want me to leave?" I asked. He hesitated. No. There was something about the way he said it, quiet, almost vulnerable, that made my chest ache. We stood there in the dim light, the air between us heavy with everything unsaid. My hand brushes in the dark, and this time he didn't pull away. His fingers closed around mine, slow but certain. "I hate that I can't just let this be simple," he said. "It's not supposed to be simple." I whispered back. The silence that followed was different now. Warmer, closer. A loud crash from outside made us both jump. The wind had torn a loose branch from the oak tree, and it had slammed against the chapel wall. He stepped instinctively closer to me, his shoulder brushing mine. "This storm's getting bad," he said. "We should wait it out here." So we sat together in one of the pews, the sound of rain beginning to drum against the roof. The chapel felt even smaller in the dark, every shift in breath magnified. "Tell me something," I said quietly. "What?" "Something you've never told anyone here." He was silent for a moment, then said, "I didn't always plan to be a priest. I almost got married once." I turned toward him, surprised. "What happened?" She ended it, said she didn't think I was ever fully there. And she was right. I think part of me was looking for something I couldn't name at the time. I held his gaze. "And now," his jaw tightened, "now I know what I was looking for." The way he said it left no room for doubt. We didn't talk much after that. The rain grew heavier, the thunder rolling closer. At some point, without thinking, I leaned into him. He didn't move away. In the dim light, I could feel the steady rise and fall of his breathing. The moment was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I thought about the council members' suspicious eyes, about the risk, about what it would mean if someone found out. But more than that, I thought about how, even with all that fear pressing in from the outside, I didn't want to be anywhere else. And maybe that was the most dangerous thought of all. By the time the storm began to ease, it was past midnight. He walked me to the door, the ground outside slick with rain. "Be careful going home," he said. I nodded, pulling my hood up, but before I stepped out, I turned back to him. "Are we deciding to stop?" His eyes held mine in the darkness. "Not tonight." The door closed behind me, and I stepped into the wet night air, my heart pounding with the knowledge that whatever came next, we'd just cross another invisible line. The Sunday after the storm felt strangely quiet. The clouds still hung low, the air cool and damp, as if the world hadn't quite recovered from the night before. I arrived at the church earlier than usual, partly to avoid walking in with the rest of the congregation, but mostly because I wanted to see him before the service began. The main hall was still empty when I slipped inside. Sunlight filtered through the tall stained glass windows, painting the floor in scattered blues and reds. I walked down the center aisle, my footsteps echoing, and stopped halfway. I didn't see him at first, but then his voice came from behind me. "You're early." I turned to see him standing near the side door, his robe loose at the collar, a stack of papers in his hands. "Couldn't sleep?" I said. He walked toward me, glancing around the empty space before stopping just close enough that I could see the faint lines of fatigue around his eyes. "You shouldn't be here before the others arrive," he said softly. "Are you worried about them or about me?" I asked. "Both," he admitted without hesitation. For a moment, neither of us moved. The silence stretched until footsteps echoed in the corridor, and he quickly stepped back, his expression slipping into something neutral. A couple of altar servers entered, and he greeted them as if nothing had passed between us. It was a reminder, sharp and clear, that whatever we had existed only in stolen fragments. The Mass itself passed in a blur. I caught him glancing at me twice during the homily, but each time he quickly looked away. The congregation was larger than usual, and I recognized the council member from before, sitting near the front. His eyes seemed to scan the room, occasionally landing on me in a way that made my stomach tighten. After the service, a crowd gathered in the parish hall for coffee and pastries. I tried to keep my distance, but when I saw Father Michael surrounded by a small group, something inside me pulled me closer. I told myself it was harmless, that I'd just say hello and leave. But as I approached, one of the older women in the group smiled warmly. "Ethan, I've seen you helping out here lately. It's so good to see young people getting involved." I felt my face heat, just trying to help where I can. Father Michael's eyes flicked to mine, a faint smile touching his lips before he quickly looked back at the others. "He's been a great help," he said, his tone casual, but I could feel the weight behind it. That's when it happened. One of the trays of coffee cups on the counter tipped precariously, and without thinking, I stepped forward to steady it. My hand brushed his. Not just a fleeting touch, but a press of palm against palm as we both grabbed the tray at the same time. It was the smallest thing, but in that moment, in front of the wrong eyes, it might as well have been a confession. I felt it instantly, the shift in the air. The council member was watching. His eyes narrowed ever so slightly, and I knew the moment had been noticed. Father Michael must have felt it too, because his hand pulled back almost instantly, his smile tightening. "Thanks, Ethan," he said, just loud enough for others to hear, as if framing the moment as nothing more than friendly cooperation. But I could feel the tension in him, even from across the room. Later that afternoon, I found him in the small library near the back of the parish offices. He was sitting at the desk, a book open but unread in front of him. "You saw him watching," I said. He looked up, his jaw tense. "Yes." "What do we do?" His eyes softened then, just a little. "We don't give him anything else to see." There was something in his voice, not cold but protective. I realized then that this wasn't just about him avoiding trouble. He was trying to shield me from it too. But the truth was, the more we tried to avoid each other, the more impossible it became to ignore what was between us. That impossibility became clear the very next day. It was late afternoon when my phone buzzed with a message. "Come to the rectory kitchen. Back entrance." I didn't even hesitate. The back entrance to the rectory was rarely used, hidden behind a line of tall hedges. I slipped inside, the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. He was there, leaning against the counter, his sleeves rolled up, a mug in hand. "I needed to see you," he said, no preamble. I closed the door behind me. "You could have called." "I didn't want to talk on the phone," he replied. "Not about this." I moved closer. "About what?" He set his mug down, his eyes locking on mine. "About the fact that I can't seem to be in the same room with you without wanting more." The words landed like a spark on dry tinder. "I'm not asking you to stop," I said quietly. "I know you're not," he said, his voice lower now. "That's the problem." We stood there in the warm, dim kitchen, the outside world feeling far away. And for a brief, reckless moment, I didn't care who might walk in. I stepped closer until there was barely a breath between us. That's when the knock came. Sharp, firm. He stepped back instantly, his eyes darting to the door. "Stay here," he said under his breath. I heard the front door open, followed by muffled voices. The tone was polite, but I could tell there was tension, the kind that comes when someone's real reason for visiting is hidden behind small talk. When he returned, his face was carefully composed, but his eyes told me everything. "It was him," he said quietly. "The council member?" He nodded. He wanted to drop off some documents. But I think he just wanted to see if he could catch me off guard. We both knew what that meant. We were running out of safe spaces. As I left through the back door that evening, the cool air hit me like a reminder of the risk, of the inevitability, of the fact that we were moving towards something we might not be able to hide much longer. And maybe, deep down, neither of us truly wanted to, because the more the walls closed in, the more urgent it felt to grab whatever moments we could before they were gone. And I had a feeling the next moment would be the one that changed everything.